There's a mass migration happening right now from California to Portland.
In this video, we're going to be unpacking why this mass migration is happening, and there might be some surprises along the way, but we're going to answer 3 big questions.
Question number 1 we're going to answer is why? Why are all these Californians moving up here to Portland? Question number 2, what lifestyle changes might they be experiencing? And question number 3, always a biggie, is how are the locals handling this migration?
We're Ann and Erica, real estate agents in the Portland metro area, and we've helped dozens and dozens of families relocate here from California and beyond. And we've seen kind of what people expect when they get here and also what surprises them when they get to Portland.
We're going to show you what's driving this migration, where these Californians are landing, what surprises them most, and what this means for the future of Portland.
All right, reason number 1 why Californians are moving to Portland is the obvious cost of living. Yes, it is. The dollar gets you further up here, and there is no mistaking that. In fact, we've said it on other videos, but Oregon is the last and only West Coast city that is the cheapest when you're looking at California, Oregon, and Washington. Obviously, Seattle is also very expensive. So what else, Erica?
Yeah, so I mean, the cost of housing here is obviously cheaper than it is in California. There's about a $400,000 discrepancy between the median price of homes between California and Oregon. So if you're thinking about what you can get when you're gonna go buy that home, or if you can even buy a home, Oregon looks pretty attractive. And that's why we see a lot of people coming up here, is that they can sell if they bought, they can sell their home down in California and get much more home up here. And if they haven't owned in California, they can actually come up here and be able to purchase a property, which is a big deal. And that would I would say is like the number 1 thing that we hear all the time, is just that their dollar's gonna go further and they can actually get a house.
Yeah, another big reason that Californians move to Portland is we don't have sales tax. So in the world of high inflation, everything seems to be costing a tremendous amount more on the daily. It's nice to not have to go to the grocery store or go buy any kind of appliances or anything and pay an additional sales tax, which in California can be anywhere from 7 to 10%. So that adds up. And as we all know, we're all trying to save a buck. So the Californians go, wow, I can come to Portland, I can buy a car, no sales tax. I can buy groceries, no sales tax. I can do all these things and not pay a stinking sales tax. So that really matters in today's world, where everything is just costing more and more and more.
That is the truth. Now, we do have a state income tax here in Oregon, and that can be up to 9.9%. So that's definitely something that come tax time every year that you have to adjust and plan for when you're doing your taxes. But it isn't as bad as it could be. And really, it does make up when you're not having to pay that, state sales tax on all of those goods that you're buying every day.
Now, let's jump into the next thing where you're probably going to save some money if you're living in California and you're planning on making a move to Oregon, and that is our property taxes. Now, we're not as cheap as Arizona, which I know a lot of people flocked to in the last few years, or Florida for that matter. But the reality is you're not going to pay as high as property taxes as you are in California. A lot of people think we're pretty reasonable. I wouldn't say we're like the most expensive, but we're not the cheapest. You're probably looking at, for a $700,000 house, probably somewhere in the neck of the woods around $8,000 to $10,000, depending on where you buy. And of course, Multnomah County, being one of our main counties of Portland, is always going to run you a bit more higher in property taxes. So a lot of times when Californians are moving up here, they're really focusing on buying a lot of their properties on the west side of town, specifically Washington County and Clackamas County. They want to keep their property taxes down. Just because they're coming from a state where they're selling their house for a lot more, they're still very mindful of the property tax situation. And we've actually shown property this year to a lot of Californians where they were surprised, right, for how much property taxes were in Multnomah County, which is Multnomah County, just say where, and that's saying so. It's saying something. Multnomah County is Portland proper, so Portland addresses. And in some areas, especially for higher end homes, I would say 800 to 900,000 and higher, you can see them skyrocket and their property taxes almost to the point where it makes it difficult for houses to be sold that are higher end, because those property taxes can be a doozy.
Well, I mean, I had one last year that literally, it ended up impacting the sales price of the property because property taxes were so high. I mean, they were $17,000 for, a home, and it was just outside of Washington County, unfortunately, sitting in Multnomah County, and it made the big difference. I mean, if you looked at properties that were in the Washington County that were, maybe a block away, much cheaper.
Yep.
And the second that you went at that same price point over that line, $17,000. And that's impactful for a lot of people. I would say the other big reason that, we're seeing here is that the cost of just your daily goods, your groceries, your utilities,
Yes.
gas, all of those things that we're using on a daily basis, those are just cheaper here. I mean, you can go to the grocery store, like you said, we don't have sales tax, but the goods themselves are generally cheaper, and even energy costs are still cheaper. We have experienced some increase in the last couple of years, but overall, we are still much cheaper than all of these other West Coast cities, and that's attractive to Californians who are moving up here. But the cost savings is not the only thing that is driving people up here. It is the lifestyle. So a lot of Californians are trading intensity for intentionality, and Portland really fits that mold.
Now, the first thing is traffic. Now, don't get me wrong, Portland has some pretty decent traffic to compete with, but we're nowhere near what it's like in California. And a lot of times when people are moving here, if they're making a commute to work, it is not uncommon for some of our Californians to say, we'll say, how long do you want your commute to be? And they'll say, well, if it's under 2 hours a day, I'm happy. And then we kind of giggle and laugh together and say we can absolutely accommodate that. That being said, we want to also say that there's traffic here in Portland, and it even happens on the weekends. And it's because we're a small, big town with a lot of people. But if you're looking for a less intense version of the traffic situation happening in California, then you're going to be quite pleasantly surprised with what Portland has.
Now, California has a lot of eco lifestyle options, but I think when you come to Portland, we really embody that. And we are a greener, slower lifestyle. I mean, we value our farmers markets. We value riding your bike and taking your kids with you and all of these outdoor community-based activities. And that is really something that's, I think, popular to Portland, is that we are just known for being very community-based. We like grassroots options. We like going to our farmers markets. We like buying local. We are kind of anti-big box entity. While we have them, we generally prefer to be able to, support our local farmer, support our local artists, and really, get to know the neighbors. Yeah, we like our little local businesses and what they bring to the community. And so I think that that's a lifestyle that a lot of people, tend to embody. We have a ton of bike lanes and designated biking areas, walking paths, and we're finding more and more that people are looking for that. Walkability is a number one thing that people ask for when they're moving up here. And we are, adjusting. We've got different options. It's not the standard walkability, but if you want to get outside in nature and really reconnect, this is the place.
The other thing that's really great about Portland, and I think a lot of Californians look at, is they're not moving to the desert. They're actually moving to a greener space. We have access to the mountains in just a little over an hour away. We've got Mount Hood, which is a fantastic ski area. I go up there all the time in the winter to ski. You can snowboard, you can sled. And you can get to the coast really quickly too. We've literally got the mountains and the coast just at your fingertips. I mean, it's really hard to find a city in the US where you have both of those. You can make a day trip for either one. And you're just down the way from the Gorge, which has incredible hiking,
amazing
views. You can head down to Hood River and have lunch. There's surfing, there's windsurfing, world-class windsurfing, and so much more going on out there. So as far as outdoor activities, you're not sacrificing anything coming up here. You're actually probably gaining. And so I think a lot of Californians who want to have access to more outdoor activities, you're absolutely getting that here in Portland.
So another thing that makes us so popular is our lifestyle is we're great for remote workers.
Yeah.
So, I think the benefit of remote working is that you kind of get to choose your area. You may not, have to work at a desk 8 hours a day, and people love the fact that they can go out and enjoy all that Portland has to offer, all the things that we just talked about, the walking trails, the hiking, the, biking options. And so in fact, I have several friends who are all remote workers and that have moved up here from California just that because they wanted the lifestyle. They wanted to be away from everything that California has, things that we'll get into. But that is the goal, is that they like the area and their job gives them the opportunity to be here and not have to be in California.
There's also a lot less density of population. So when you move to Portland, you find that people like to kind of scurry away to the local bookstores and read books in a corner, or go to a local cafe and hang out for the day, or kind of walk around and just enjoy some of what Portland has to offer, there's not this jam-packed feeling of like people everywhere. There's space for everyone. There's space to do things for everyone, despite the fact that our weather sometimes keeps us inside because it's so wet. You can also get outside when it's wet. You know, the weather doesn't often stop everybody, but it's just one of those places where you feel like there's a little nook and cranny for everyone. And for people who are trying to get away from the density, especially in big cities like LA, San Francisco, this kind of feels like, even though you're in a big metropolitan area, it doesn't feel like you're just all on top of each other.
And I think to go along with that is we have a little bit slower pace, a little slower bureaucracy. And so, you know, we value the idea of not necessarily being a slave to the system, being a slave to your jobs. We want to get outside. Now, it does take a little bit longer to get things done sometimes. You know, our cities are not super fast when it comes to processing things like building permits or any sort of permit.
Yeah.
But that being said, you know, there's something nice about that. It's so that you're not expected to, you know, work 15, 16 hours a day and then go back and do it the next day, 7 days in a row. We really value getting outside, reconnecting with nature, and just taking that slower approach to life. But, you know, that being said, Portland isn't just a mood board. I mean, there are some real quirks about this area that you should probably know about before you pack your bags.
All right, number 2, and this is what catches Californians off guard, even if they visited, you guys. It's time to listen up, because these are the things that surprise people the most, even if they have visited or spent some time here before they made their move.
So I think that the biggest one that we're going to tackle is our gray winters and our amount of rain that we get. Now, everybody thinks they like rain if they're coming from somewhere else, but I think what's really important to point out here is that we don't just get like a 20-minute rain shower that goes away and then you have sunny, beautiful weather.
Yeah.
We get 155 days, and I think that that's a low number, but 155 days of rain. And that comes in all forms and shapes and sizes. And I'm a native Northwesterner. Grew up in Washington, very rainy. Live in Oregon for the last almost 30 years. Yeah, very rainy. And it still gets to me in the middle of winter, because come October, our days get very short. You have very little daylight. You could easily be going to work in the dark. You could be coming home in the dark. And it's black dark. It's like very, very dark. And so that very little bit of daylight, it could also be kind of dark, because we have a lot of gray overcast days where the
clouds are low.
Yeah, exactly. The clouds are very low. You feel like you're being oppressed. And it's very hard to mentally like stay positive like it is on one of these gorgeous days that we have right now. And, you know, we always encourage clients to come up, especially if you're coming from somewhere like Arizona or California, come up and stay a month. And we had some clients recently who did this. And of course it was sunny and gorgeous. And then January, when they
like 3 weeks straight of gorgeous weather in January of all places, which is usually our worst month.
Terrible. You know, and so, but you do want to try to get an idea of what that's really like if you can, because it is not just a rainy day here or there or a gray overcast day here or there. It is a lot. And I have some friends who moved up from California several years ago, and they were coming up for, you know, several trips a year. We're talking like not just a weekend, but it would be like a week-long trip, and they would stay all throughout the year. And when they moved up here, they still struggle in the dead of winter with how hard it is. And it just gets to be a lot. We have a lot different, you know, like we get muddy, it gets wet, you get dirty, and it is not the same as just coming up here for a visit or living somewhere where it rains occasionally during the winter. So definitely something to keep in mind if you're sensitive to daylight or sensitive to mood issues because of, you know, what your environment's like.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that while we talk about the traffic's not as bad as California, you need to be aware and prepared that you can be 5 miles from your house and you can sit in traffic for 30 to 45 minutes, because we don't have roads that are set up for the density. And Portlanders are pretty nice. That's one thing we actually tell people is like,
To a fault.
we are nice to a fault. We will let people in on the roads. Oh, come on in, you know, if you're driving along.
Like stop in traffic.
Yes, and that kind of bottlenecks and makes the problem worse with our traffic. And not to mention, we're always doing construction on the roads. Everywhere you turn, they're trying to widen the roads, add a lane, you know? And so, of course, adding construction to this whole mess is making everything bottleneck and slow down further. A lot of times you need to look at your, you know, Google Maps and your Wise apps and make sure that it might say, you know, hey, it's only a, you know, 8-mile drive, but in a, congested traffic time of the day, that could add an extra 20 minutes to your commute. So traffic is different here, and it's important to be aware of that, because I know people that get extremely frustrated to the point where they're like, and again, when you move here and where you move to, like if you're going to commute to work or you have a lot of different activities and so forth all around town, that will drive you absolutely crazy. And it does. So where you live is where you live. A lot of people, they don't go too far away from where they live to do their activities, their shopping, their this and that because of the traffic. So don't let it come and surprise you that the traffic is so bad in a different kind of way. Like you down in California might be sitting on a 4-lane freeway for an hour, but here you're sitting on a small road, just a few blocks or miles from where you're trying to get to. And you're like, what is up with this traffic?
I mean, something else that is kind of all over the place, and it's kind of a touchy subject, is our homelessness issue. And it's definitely bad in the city, in Portland proper, but you're gonna find it in the suburbs as well.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of this, driving problem that unfortunately is not getting better, but it's just something to keep in mind. If you are sensitive to that, or if you're concerned about safety, then you're probably gonna, wanna be doing your homework on some areas, or maybe Portland's not the right place, because it is definitely an issue everywhere.
And I'd like to share a story about that, because let me give you an example of like the burbs, right? Yes, you don't see it quite as acute in the suburbs. However, where I live, about the last 18 months, they were proposing homeless parking. So they call it safe parking in certain areas. So they'll take like a church parking lot or a public parking lot of some kind, and they want homeless people to be able to park in there overnight and eventually go to solid housing. Well, the community was in an uproar about it, because with a lot of houseless, homeless people, there comes other activities like drug usage or crime or things of that nature. And so here in the community I live in, we didn't expect any of that to happen or to be an issue. But according to going through that process, I kind of learned that, even in the suburbs, there is an intense issue going on with people in homelessness, and it's pushing out into the suburbs. And the reality is it's everywhere. So
yeah, and Portland has a housing first model that they follow. You can debate whether or not you think it's the right model, but with that, it does not stop any of the other. And we have a lot of resources for homeless, which also allows them to sometimes keep that lifestyle. So if you're sensitive to it, just know it's everywhere.
Now, another issue to be aware of is the permit situation. So this obviously comes into play with Erica and I a lot, because we help people buy and sell properties here in Portland. And so some people come to us and say, hey, I want to build a house, or I want to buy new construction. Well, first of all, Multnomah County is horrific in terms of their turnaround times for permits and getting things done. In fact, in most cases, a lot of builders and developers have stopped building and doing activity as far as, creating housing, because it's so expensive. Number one, it could cost you $60,000 just to get a permit in Portland metropolitan. And then on top of that, it might take you 12 to 16 months just to get the project started, which is heavy carrying costs for a lot of builders. And it's just priced them completely out of making any kind of housing, A, affordable, and B, they're just not gonna, they're not gonna put themselves through it. Now, is Washington County and Clackamas County any better? Yes and no. Clackamas County, word on the street, and I've actually had clients deal with them, is they're better. They're responsive. They're really great. Washington County has a lot of problems. And part of that is there's a big population boom happening in Washington County. There's a lot of backup. They don't have, my understanding also is they just don't have enough people working at the county to help process these applications and get the permits moving forward. And they kind of sit in stagnation for a while. So when you go to buy new construction, a lot of times it's important to understand that a lot of these builders, just to get the permits going, can take a few weeks or if not months. And so that's a part of how these construction processes try to sell their inventory.
Yeah, it's part of really why they don't do a ton of like very customer, you can pick whatever floor plan that you'd like to put on a lot, is because it speeds up their process if they can have each lot kind of predetermined for, and have already submitted permits.
Yeah, you just dealt with this on
a
property.
Yep, exactly. It's a big issue. It can be anywhere from, 4 weeks if you're really, really lucky, which I'm being told, which I've never had experience with.
Yeah.
Up to 8 months. I mean, it's just wild. Another thing is that we've talked about we don't have sales tax, but we do have the state income tax, and it's different from Texas. I mean, can be a pretty big chunk of change for a lot of people when they're coming to our state to experience that. Like, you're not just going to pay your federal, you're going to pay a state income tax, and if you're,
a high earner,
if you're doing well, that's going to be a chunk of change that Oregon's going to take from you. And so, it's really important to understand what your trade-offs are going to be to make your transition smoother and avoid regret.
All right, if you're thinking about moving to Portland from California, another thing to be aware of is the political fit. So we're not a secret that Portland is incredibly Democratic, and we will say it's incredibly liberal. But let us break it down for you, because it's really important you understand what it looks like. Is all of Portland extremely liberal? How would you fit in? Erica?
Yeah, so I would say that, everybody's welcome here.
Yep.
However, if you want to be right in the heart of Portland, just know Portland is kind of left of left. We find day after day that even, hardcore Democrats kind of find it even a little bit much for them. And you've had experience with.
Yeah, so I had a same-sex couple that moved here, lived in a house for about 5 years, got to be a part of the Democratic Society because they have a heart for being in politics. And they ended up moving back to California. And when I asked them, why are you moving back? And they said, well, we're Democratic, but we got on the committees here for being in, supporting democracy. And they said even for them, it was too liberal. They didn't realize how liberal Portland really was. And so they just wanted to go back to an area of California that kind of felt a little bit more at home for them.
But that being said, once you get outside of the city into the suburbs and definitely into the more rural areas, it starts to shift.
Yeah.
I would almost call Portland or Oregon in general a purple state, because we have a lot of red in the outlying areas. We have some very concentrated areas of hardcore Democrats, and then we have some middle ground. And really at the end of the day, I think that we're an area that is going to accept everybody. Just know that if you want to be right in the city, that you should probably be prepared for a little more left of center.
Yeah, and in the burbs, you'll find a lot of independents, conservatives, Democrats, and kind of a spectrum. We like to say there's a spectrum of Democrats and so forth, where sometimes they're stronger in opinion on different topics, but you can feel like home anywhere because it's not always in your face. But just be aware that, the burbs versus the inner city is going to feel very different politically.
Yeah, and like even libertarians, where we're not necessarily hardcore to one party or the other. We like the idea. We want to base our judgments off of, like, is this a good idea that we see working for the people of our state? And that's kind of generally how we will vote. We do want to take care of people, and if it seems like a good plan that's going to help people, then most people will get behind it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Californians feel that Portland is a little lighter on some of the regulations that are going on in California, and so they feel like they're kind of almost escaping their own type of, hard left in a way when they come up here. But the thing is if you are, be aware it is a blue state. It's primarily blue.
Yep.
Leadership is blue. If you're heavily bothered and you're a conservative, don't be in the Portland metro area. Maybe look into further out areas
Or
suburbs, because it will bother you. We talk to a lot of conservatives that they're really bothered by what the leadership here is doing and what's happening, and they're worried and concerned. And so, if that's something important to you, you really got to reconsider maybe making a move here. But if you're sort of somewhere in the middle, independent, all that, then you do pretty good here, because like Erica said, there's an acceptance level here. And you can kind of do your own thing and mind your own business.
Yep, for sure.
All right, so here's the next big question. Who's moving here and where are they moving? Interestingly enough, Portland has something for everybody. And whenever we go to the economic forecast forums throughout the years, we hear one thing that is very interesting that keeps Portland's demographics really, really healthy. And that is that we don't just have one type of person moving to Portland. No. We have retirees, we have young professionals, we have families. We have, kind of a gamut and a range of people, and that actually keeps our economy very healthy. Erica, why don't you break down, where are some of these people actually moving to in the Portland area?
Yeah, so we generally tend to find that the families that are moving here, they're looking for good school districts. That's going to be your Lake Oswego, your Westland, East Sherwood, these areas that have really highly rated schools. They've got great communities to them. And, we do have a lot of these families moving up here. The young professionals, I will generally say that they tend to gravitate towards being in the hot spots of the Portland metro area. So like Southeast, Hawthorne, Alberta, the Arts District, all that kind of stuff. But we have recently seen this kind of being a little bit of a shifting trend. We recently had some buyers who were moving here from the East Coast, major city, and they were very torn between whether or not they wanted that walkable downtown lifestyle where they could be close to the restaurants and close to their friends and work, and whether or not, or if they wanted to shift out to the burbs and start kind of transitioning to that more like relaxed family type living style.
What won out?
To be honest, the burbs won out. So, you know, at the end of the day, they looked at all the pros and cons, you know, crime and comfort, long-term sustainability for them, and they ended up moving out to the burbs, a fantastic property. But, you know, it just speaks to the idea that it is a shifting thing. But we do tend to find that a lot of the younger professionals who are still in that era of life where they want to experience, you know, maybe nightlife or going out or being able to get together with friends and go to a bar pretty easily, they still do choose some of these hot spots in Portland.
The other type of demographic we see is a lot of remote workers. Obviously, more and more people have become remote since COVID, but we see a lot of people that are remote workers choosing to kind of live in areas like the burbs, maybe Hillsborough, Beaverton,
Further out.
or even further out. Like sometimes they're ready to take that plunge into having some privacy on acreage. And, you know, remote workers, I mean, they have a gamut to choose from, but oftentimes they're not always wanting to be in the city hustle and bustle. They kind of like to have it a little bit more quiet or have some amenities at their fingertips that only are able to be, you know, in certain parts of Portland. So remote workers is a pretty big demographic.
Yeah, I've got some friends who moved up here again from California, both remote workers, and they are away from everything. They are an hour to get into Portland, but they love it. That fits their lifestyle, and that was part of what they loved about moving up here, is that they wanted to, you know, get away from it. I think our other big demographic that's moving up here are retirees.
Yes.
So we see people all the time who are moving to be close to their kids, moving to just enjoy the lifestyle that we offer here in Oregon and Portland specifically. But I would say, you know, we have a huge clientele of people who are retired and choosing Portland and the surrounding metro as their place to land. You know, what's nice is that we do obviously have an international airport. So if these, you know, retirees decide that they want to travel, they've got, you know, that right at their fingertips, and they're not having to travel several hours to get to an airport. And then you've got everything in between. So you don't even have to choose between whether or not you want to be at the mountains or at the coast. You can choose every day and it can be some difference. So, you know, we are maybe tax-wise not the best for retirees, but we are a lifestyle that is really hard to not love.
All right, the other thing that we're seeing, and this is huge, is that a lot of Californians are coming to Oregon as climate refugees. That's what we actually call them.
Yeah.
Because similar to how hurricanes are hitting Floridians, and we've gotten calls from them, Californians, especially after this last fire season, we got flooded with phone calls because it really freaked a lot of Californians out who deal every year with California fires, but this has been a unique...
It's hitting a new level of like unrealistic, not able to deal with. And, you know, there's such a broad scope of loss. And then you add to the fact that in California, it takes such a long process to get your permits, or any sort of rebuilding is going to be several years in the making.
Yeah.
And we are just finding, you know, I hear it with my horse friends all the time, that there is a PTSD, a very, you know, guttural fear of having to evacuate animals or your family or your, you know, even your, you know, household domesticated pets. And I think they're just hitting that breaking point where they don't want to deal with this every year. They don't want to know, is it going to be a big fire? Is it going to be a little fire? You know, are we going to have water to be able to do that? Because we don't worry about water up here.
Nope. Well, it gets dry, but it's not like...
dry, but we don't have the same type of fire season. And to be honest, while we've had one or two kind of get close to the Portland metro, that is not our normal. Generally, the fire season happens in Southern Oregon and a little bit in Central Eastern Oregon. But we are pretty protected. Now, we have a smoke season.
Yeah.
So
the winds kick the wrong direction. If there's a fire going on in, you know, further out areas of, you know, Oregon, we can sometimes get a day or two of haze. Worst case, it's close to a week. And that usually happens in like late July, August, maybe early September. But there are some summers we don't have any of it. But if it's going to happen, it's usually around that time.
So I think all of these things kind of just, you know, add to that kind of, if they can get a very similar lifestyle, they can get more for their money, why wouldn't they come up here?
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is the insurance. So let's talk about that for a minute. So a lot of people are starting to really worry that their housing will not be able to be insured. A lot of insurance companies have dropped consumers. It's no surprise that was all over the news when this last fire season hit. Interestingly enough, in Oregon, there is a law that insurance companies cannot drop you as a homeowner whether you're in a fire district or not, or they can't refuse to renew. So that gives a lot of people assurances that we're not going to face the same problems that California and Florida are facing with their climate issues that are happening. And so for the sake of just not having to deal with fires here in the Portland metro area, being a wetter climate in general, even though our summers are getting hotter and drier, we're just not seeing that same fire risk. And so a lot of them are fleeing, and they're realizing that this is probably not going to get any better for them, and they don't want to deal with it anymore. And so they just say, that's it, I'm done. And we've seen it, this year especially was a turning point. We've always dealt with Californians moving here because of the possibility of fires. Maybe they had to evacuate once or twice, or their insurance costs went up. But when the actual, fire season happened this earlier this year of 2025, and they watched entire towns get completely decimated, and the hope of trying to rebuild and the costs and all that, it was like they're cashing out, they're done, they're coming north, and yeah, it just makes Portland really attractive.
So Anne, I think what does this mean for the Portland housing market in 2025?
Well, let's talk about it. All right, now we're going to be talking about what do you need to know in regards to the Portland real estate market up here in Portland if you're making a move. Erica.
Yeah, so we're going to talk pricing, inventory, all the things. But I think the most important thing to know is that when we talk about our median price point here in the Portland metro market, that's not going to be generally where you actually land as a price point.
What is the average price point here?
Our average price point here is actually closer to probably the mid 700s.
Yeah.
And that's to get closer to what you want. So if you're thinking about the 550 range, you're generally getting maybe a 3.2, 1,200 square feet. They're pretty small. So if that works for you, great. But we generally find that people want something a little bit bigger, closer to 2,000 square feet. Maybe they need that fourth bedroom as an office so that they can work from home, or a bonus room.
Well, quite frankly, just looking at a certain community or type of house, like
that's the other thing.
One levels. I think Erica and I get a phone call every single week requesting to find a one level. And let me tell you, it doesn't matter what price point you're at.
You're going to fight for it.
You will fight for it. They will be few and far between because we don't have enough of them. And so just be warned, you're probably watching this thinking, oh gosh, I wanted a one level. Well, we're going to give you our one level conversation that will help you understand how you're going to be able to tackle those when you call us. So give us a call if you're looking for one level.
But to speak to Anna's point, location as well. If you're looking to be in Lake Oswego, which is one of our most expensive communities, you can plan to generally be a minimum of about $1 million. And that's not getting you a lot. That's still probably only getting you like 1,500 to 1,700 square feet or something that needs a healthy renovation. So, understanding what to expect at every price point in every location. And we have what we call a micro market. So each neighborhood, each, very tiny location has its own market as to what's normal for its pricing and how quickly it's going to move. But if you see a cream puff, if you see something that is a one level, even if it's not updated, those things are generally going to fly off the shelves, and you are going to still have to compete for those even in this market. While other homes are sitting on the market for, weeks, if not even months.
Yeah, and also new construction. While we do have new construction, there's two things to be aware of it. Number one is it's not custom built.
No.
A lot of people have this sense that they can buy new construction, go in and change walls and add electrical and this, that, and the other. And unfortunately, with the new construction these days, it is not that way. You basically have to choose a floor plan that the builder gives you options for. They usually give you 1 or 3 design packages to choose from if they've actually haven't gotten to that point of deciding. And you just don't get a lot of say.
No.
So don't expect custom. The second thing is while we have new construction, we just don't have a lot of it. We haven't built enough homes. Portland has always lacked inventory since the recession of 2008 through 2012. We're behind in our building, and we also have this imaginary line that goes all the way around Portland called the urban growth boundary. We cannot do urban sprawl. So even when the market was on fire, and we were needing more housing, the builders can't go out and just buy acreage and build a subdivision. It takes years and years and years to have that annexed in. So we're always gonna probably stay in a limited inventory market to some degree. So it's not like we have a ton of homes. In fact, we get that a lot from clients who are like, hey, why isn't more houses on the market? And we always have to say they kind of just trickle on, and it's not like we have these big surges or that there's some inventory hiding from you somewhere.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, housing affordability. So we talk about it all the time. We don't have a ton of low income or housing affordable options. In Portland, they have a little bit more. Generally it's about $30,000 off the listed price. And the problem with that, though, is you're not really getting great options. A lot of them are detached condos, and you're just packed in there like a sardine, which makes it pretty difficult. It's not a very desirable type of housing. And then there's very limited amounts of it. And you don't find that generally in the suburbs. You're going to be in a townhouse or maybe a condo. And, you've got other issues to think about when you go that route. But between having limited, new construction, quantity not being super high, it really just does not lead to a huge selection of affordable housing.
Now let's talk about how is this affecting locals? Because, do locals like it when Californians move here? Let's talk about the evolution of that. So when I got into real estate over 20 years ago, it was anti-California. I mean,
it was that would go up and would put for sale signs that were like, do not sell to California.
Now the reality is we got some geese flying over us. The reality of today is that it's very common that people move here from California or any other state. In fact, most people you meet here in Oregon, they are not from Oregon.
Nope.
Eric and I are, born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, but in most cases, when you meet people here, they're from somewhere else. And so it's not uncommon anymore for people to move here. In fact, I think sellers like it when they see California license plates driving around, because that means, hey, they're going to buy my house.
So I think sellers like Californians a lot because they generally think that our prices are really good. And then I think if we have local buyers, they're generally not super excited to see California.
Yeah, and how is that playing out? Like, are we finding that locals are getting squeezed and Californians are taking over?
They are unfortunately still getting a little squeezed. I mean, generally when our Californians come up, if they're not cash buyers, they have a healthy down payment just because their dollar is going so much further, especially if they've sold a house in California or if they've been prepping for this, they know that they need to come with a pretty good package. And we just generally find that the Californians coming up are really easily qualified or highly qualified. And, that's not always the case because Portland used to be much more affordable and we've gone up. I mean, our market has gone up significantly in the past several years. And it's making it hard for those people who have, grown up here and seen such a drastic change in the housing market. And it's a bummer for them. So there is a little bit of tension there, I would say, for these, Oregonian buyers or these Portland buyers who are now getting pushed out. But it's the unfortunate nature of the market. And that's just, I don't think the Californians are going anywhere.
The truth is, Oregon's not just affordable, it's also becoming the go-to place for Californians to move to. Californians who want more space, freedom, and choices. And the reality is you don't want to make a move to Portland and choose the wrong area, neighborhood, school zone, or make costly mistakes. That's why it's so important to have somebody that knows how to help people move across state lines like we do. We help a lot of Californians every single year make the move to Portland. So please reach out if that's you.
So call the number on the screen or send us a message. We can help you avoid making common mistakes and let you make this move with confidence. And if you want to hear what it's like to live in the city from real locals, we did just that. We asked Portland locals what they think about living in the city, and you can watch that video right here.